The Kwisatz Haderach. So I got to watch Dune Part 2 in IMAX for an early access release for us regular folks. Most people are going to be watching it this weekend, which is probably why you're watching this video, or you're watching it in the far future. Tell me how it's like. Warn me if you can. It just took me forever to make this video because random things kept on delaying me. I bought the wrong batteries for my audio recorder, so now I'm using them as a little mic holder, and I forgot my kangaroo hat. My kangaroo rat hat, can't forget it. That's Muad'Dib right there, dude. And the reason why I watched it so early, I wanted to watch it so quickly, is because I don't want to be spoiled anything. When I'm so excited to watch something, I don't want anyone else to tell me what it's like, what it's going to be like. And I'm going to give you the same courtesy. I'm going to have a spoiler-free section, and then I'll talk more about things that I think would ruin your experience going in for the first time. So let's jump into it. First off, of course, we have to talk about the director, Villeneuve. Really the only reason why these movies even exist in the first place. He's an amazing director. He's shaping up to be one of the best living directors nowadays, which is crazy to say because even though Hollywood gives us a lot of schlock, a lot of assembly line movies, there's still a lot of great legendary living directors like Scorsese, Tarantino, the Coen brothers, Nolan, and Bong Joon-ho, and the list goes on and on. For someone who's in the middle of their directing career, he has not slowed down one bit. It's been hit after hit after hit, and this one is his next peak. I like how he takes his very specific style and applies to different kinds of genres and stories, so it has that very new feeling every time it comes out with a film, but it still has that consistent storytelling strength. And of course with Dune, it's about capturing the very specific vibe and mood.
Mood? What's mood to do with it?
I would say it has very specific scientific tropes, ideas, and planets, very specific ecosystems, very specific groups of people, and it can become very cringy or over the top, but he's able to balance those sci-fi ideas while still having that medieval aesthetic. Something that surprised me is how much comedy there is at the beginning of the movie, mainly with Stilgar. He actually becomes a lot more of a funny character than I expected, especially from his portrayal in part 1. I thought that was really good because it helped with the rising tension later on in the film. There were a lot of changes from the books, but I don't mind most of them, and I would even say that some of the changes from the books actually enhance some of the themes that the film is trying to explore. But before I get into spoilers, let's move on to something that people forget often is that films are not a one-man sport. They're not a one-man team. They require a lot of people doing a lot of creative things for a movie at this scale to work properly. And one of them is very much Greg Fraser. His cinematography makes him stand out a lot, especially with the part 1 and part 2. There are some shots here that he takes that are just aghast. It blew my mind away, the fact that I've never seen something like this. He's clearly shaping up to become one of the best cinematographers working in Hollywood. The Dune movies, the Batman, and also The Creator, which I feel like if he wasn't part of that movie, it would have gotten zero hype and it would have made zero money. I'm glad he came back to do part 2. He really sells the visuals perfectly. Of course, cinematography wouldn't work without the set design and the VFX. Patrice Vermette on set design really killed it here. A lot of the stuff that's in the books that is never spoken by the characters is really fleshed out with the set designs. Of course, we can't forget Hans Zimmer. Music in a film is almost just as important as the visuals, especially when it comes to a story like this, because a lot of moments aren't big battles, these big fight scenes, but some of the moments are really tiny, and Hans Zimmer's score is able to enhance and helps emotionally guide the audience. For someone that might not know the story from the books, might not know where the story is going, the score helps enhance their experience of it. But honestly, if you're not someone that pays attention to the technical aspects of a movie, you will not notice any of these. The movie is seamless. I would say that it's perfect when it comes to its visual effects. Of course, I would have to see it multiple times. First time watching it, you're kind of just absorbing the atmosphere, absorbing the visuals. But I would say that on a technical aspect, this movie can't get much better. Timothée Chalamet does an amazing job at playing Paul. When I first read the books, I pictured someone maybe a little bit more taller, a little bit more muscular, but he's able to use his smaller physique to his advantage. Now so much that I can't picture Paul without seeing him. And that's true for a lot of these actors. Josh Brolin, Javier Bardem, and Dave Bautista was not who I would have chosen to play these specific characters, but I would have chosen wrong. Many times I'm shocked at the delivery when it comes to many small mannerisms that these characters have, especially little things from the books that they can't say. These actors are able to draw it out, which is fantastic to see. Rebecca Ferguson as Jessica, I think, is perfect here. She is supposed to give us an example of a Bene Gesserit that's gone a little bit rogue. And now that we see other Bene Gesserit, ones that are not as rebellious as Jessica, you can see the contrast here. She does an amazing job, just like she did in the first one. I really love how the dynamic between her and Paul have changed. In the first one, they were constantly working together. They were like an unstoppable duo. And in this movie, we see a lot more conflict between them. They have diversified interests. Some of them are the same, some of them aren't. And it's really interesting to see these two characters butt heads. Pugh and Walken, who play the royalty in this, do a really fantastic job with the very little screen time that they have. Walken at one point sits on the throne, something like this. It's supposed to be this intimidating posture, but he comes off as really weak and scrawny. A posture that probably at one point was really intimidating comes off as very vulnerable. I love the physical display of language coming through here. And like I said with Rebecca, Florence Pugh does an amazing job of playing a Bene Gesserit that isn't rebellious. You can see that she still has a little bit of a rebellious side, but she ultimately sides. And no great film with its good guys can't have its also amazing bad guys. And I think the villains in this movie are just perfect. Skarsgård from the first film already set himself as the Baron for me permanently in my mind. And while he does get less screen time here, I still enjoy these little moments. He just has this big, rubbery boulder that just runs over everything vibe. And then of course Austin Butler plays Feyd-Rautha, and he's the complete opposite of the Baron here. Baron is this big, bulky, all-consuming creature, where Feyd-Rautha is this sharp-edged knife that is constantly cutting at itself to become even sharper, and they just play off of each other in a way that is just beautiful. I love their performances. Butler completely loses himself. I can't believe this guy was playing Elvis a year ago. I wouldn't be able to recognize him if you didn't tell me that it was him. He does in one scene what some people can't do in multiple movies. He paints a perfect character, a perfect image of a character, a bad person, not a good person, but he's able to take very few moments and he's able to establish a character. He steals the screen right away. And if he wasn't laughing while he killed people, I would almost be rooting for him. You love to hate them so much. Of course, if you haven't noticed by now, I have not talked about Zendaya, who is advertised as co-starring for this film, which I thought was strange because Chaney is not huge in the books when it comes to what happens to major parts in this book. She's obviously important. She's Paul's wife, concubine, whatever they call it in the books. I forget what they call her. But I'm actually really surprised at what they did with her here. In the first movie, I really did not like Zendaya. She had Spider-Man vibes. She had those teenager vibes, not that really tough Fremen mood to her. She didn't have that mindset, I felt like. But she really comes off as persistent, strong-willed here. I think what they did with her character is really well. I think it sets up later themes perfectly, and I'm surprised and I'm glad that she did not ruin the movie for me. I was really coming in and clenching my teeth, not knowing what would come from her performance, but she does a really good job here. So here are just some general thoughts. I didn't know how to categorize these ones. Some things that I liked, some things I didn't like. One thing that I really didn't like is that in the books, the Fremen people are really focused on conserving their water, so much that one of the characters cries in the books and they wipe away the tear and they say, do not waste water on the dead. That's how serious they are about water. In the movie, there are multiple scenes, multiple parts where the Fremen are just sitting out in the desert during the daytime with the sun beating on them. That would not happen in the books. Of course, they have to do that for the movie because you can't have your actors covered head to toe 95% of the movie. I get it, but I do feel like that is a wasted detail. I will say everything else with the Fremen I absolutely loved. I think the Fremen are the highlight of this movie, highlight of the books. They really show what happens to a group of people when they put on so much pressure from the environment, from the ruling power, and I really enjoyed watching them on screen play out what they did in the books. I think they are the heart of the film. These people are devoted to the smallest detail. They're very extreme culture, very refreshing, very interesting to watch. A group of people that are so dedicated to what they believe, so dedicated to their culture, so dedicated to their people. Another great part about this movie, and something that I was worried about, is that there are a lot of parts in the book where they spend a lot of time detailing the certain levels of Fremen culture, certain levels that Paul has to reach. In another movie, I feel like they would have montaged it. You know, he would quickly go through all the ropes so that we can get to the fun stuff. But this movie takes its time. Its pacing is slow, but it's not boring. It shows you every little intricate detail and sets up all the motivations for all the parties perfectly for the ending of the movie. And with a slow movie like this, you're able to get a lot more details on second and third watchings. I know when I go watch it again, I'll see things that I won't see the first time because the movie is very methodically bringing you into this atmosphere and vibe that I loved it. This film also does a really good job of interweaving different religions. Obviously, the Fremen people are based off of Middle Eastern and Muslim culture, but there is a lot of interweaving with other faiths: Christian, Jewish, Hindu, and Buddhist. And that's because Frank Herbert wasn't targeting any specific religion or any specific ideology either. In fact, both mediums show the flaws in groupthink and how faith plays into some of our greatest achievements, but is also part of our greatest missteps as well. I know I've been talking a lot about the book, but I don't want to worry anybody who's coming in without reading any of the books. You do not need to read the book to enjoy this film. It comes from a perspective of someone who's not read anything, heard anything about this series. It comes from a perspective of a newcomer, yet it leaves a lot for book lovers as well. It gives you all the ideas and themes without ever insulting your intelligence. Okay, lastly, I'm going to talk about some spoiler stuff, some things that I feel would ruin your experience if you're watching for the first time. So if you don't want to hear that, I would leave now. The door is right there. So like I mentioned before, I do think they made some changes here to better flow into the third film, which is the fact that not many people realize that Paul is not a perfect hero. He's layered with a lot of tragedy, a lot of misdirection, and a lot of that isn't revealed until the second book. But in part 2, they changed that a little bit. Cheney, played by Zendaya, sees Paul going down that dark path. She kind of predicts what happens in the second book. And so her character arc here is struggling to pull back on Paul's plan to become the Muad'Dib, to become the Kwisatz Haderach, which is a big change from the book, but a welcomed one. The music score and the lighting help a lot with this. A lot of the musical notes, a lot of the musical moments are very sinister, very creepy, parts where you think Paul would be triumphant and they would be playing this, very happy, epic music. They play a lot of more sinister, a lot more dark-toned music points, and that helps with the light as well because he's constantly bathed in shadow, constantly bathed in darkness. There are two fractions of the Fremen here, more of the fundamentalist, that's who Stilgar is, who's played out as kind of as a joke, and I don't know if I like that yet. I'll have to see on my second viewing. But there's the fundamentalists, and then there are people who want the Fremen to be born from themselves. They want to be saved by a Fremen, they want the Fremen to be in power, and that's where Zendaya comes in, and she tries to pull Paul back from his dark destiny, his burden that he talks about a lot. I do think that it is very tragically comical that the Harkonnens, these super evil people, they're like a mixture of communists, Nazis, white supremacists, and a tyrannical government at the same time. They kill so many of their own helpers, their lackeys, their henchmen throughout the movie. It's a little insane, a little bit almost actually funny to see how many of their own people they kill. They don't even need the Atreides to do it. They can do it themselves. The second that they lose power, the second that they're overthrown by the Fremen and Paul Atreides, the Fremen do exactly what they were doing to them right back. And I think that plays into one line that the Reverend Mother says. She says that there are no sides in a story like this. There are no good guys, there are no bad guys, because power ultimately corrupts for the most part. That even good people placed with that much power are ultimately going to oppress the weak, oppress the minority, because that's just how power works. And so when Paul defeats Feyd-Rautha, white supremacist, Nazi, communist, evil, cannibalistic, murdering guy, he turns around and murders billions. And I love the theme of that. I love that it's played out here. It's a lot more sharper here than I would say in the book. This theme of burden of destiny, or this warning of charismatic leaders, I'm very excited to see crescendo in the third film. I feel like they've really set it up. It's like a bubble waiting to pop. The last shot of the movie is Zendaya's character riding off into the desert, angry that Paul did what he did, and I feel like the third film is gonna play out those themes perfectly. Other things I liked is that Paul's sister, who's still in Jessica's womb, she's still to be born, but she gains consciousness from the water of life. I like that she still plays a major role in this movie, even though she's literally a fetus. I thought that was cool. Some of the shots in the womb kind of remind me of 2001: A Space Odyssey. So I'm really excited to see her character in the third movie have a bigger impact, even bigger than she did in this one. Overall, there's not that many spoilers you could give if you're someone who's already read the books. They follow the story pretty much beat for beat, and I really enjoyed that. And I hope they keep that consistency for the third film. Anyways, if you can't tell by now, I really enjoyed this movie. I'm glad I watched it in IMAX. That's what I recommend you watching it in. And I also got to watch it with a couple of friends, people who are not fans of the books, who have not read a single word. And it was really interesting to see their perspective. They enjoyed it as well. Villeneuve really outdid himself here, and I do think this is shaping up to be the next big trilogy up there with the original Star Wars and the Lord of the Rings. I highly recommend it. Everything from the first movie is paid off perfectly here, and I would say that this movie is a 10 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.